traffic is the most expensive thing in the digital world. Smartest thing is to handle your traffic better rather than go get more traffic.
I can't tell you how many times I've booked a seat. I know I picked a stupid seat and I get a different seat, and I know I didn't choose this seat. Oh my gosh, this happens to me way too much.
Obviously, I can just take the US website, translate it to Spanish, go try it in Mexico. It won't work.
It's kind of the evolution of technology, the evolution of these things that we take for granted today. At one point, were competitive advantages. We're bringing back another episode from the vault. And this episode originally aired 2 years ago, but the insights are more relevant than ever.
It's one of my favorites. Naveen Gunti from American Eagle completely changed how we think about international e-commerce. And spoiler, it's way more complicated than just translating the website.
International means a lot more than just different languages. They had to launch in 60 countries, each with completely different consumer behaviors, payment systems, and expectations.
He breaks down why American Eagle is seen as an aspirational premium brand outside of the US, but not necessarily inside, and why pants in the US are trousers in the UK, and why getting product naming wrong is friction before someone even sees your product.
Naveen also introduces the concept he calls macro friction, which basically is friction that comes from outside your own website. You can have the perfect checkout flow, but if a marketplace in that country delivers in 1 hour and you take 3 days, that's friction too.
And we get into some wild market differences. Mexico is still heavily cash-based, so they partnered with OXXO, a chain with 15,000 locations where you can place an order online and pay with cash in store. India went straight to mobile, leapfrogged broadband entirely, and now expects 1 hour delivery as the baseline.
We also talked about something we talk about on a lot of episodes, developer bias and product bias. You're building experiences for yourself in ideal conditions on the best network. Your users aren't in those conditions.
And even internationally, it gets it even worse because you have no expectation of what those conditions even really are. It's frankly difficult to even measure it. And then he gives maybe the best advice of any episode. Stop making assumptions. Put yourself in the user's shoes and test, then test again. Because if you think you've eliminated all friction, that's when you've just created it.
All right, let's get into it. Hello, and welcome to the Frictionless Experience Podcast, the podcast where we lay waste to digital friction. I'm Chuck Moxley.
And I'm Nick Paladino.
On today's episode, we'll be talking about some of the unique aspects of creating frictionless digital experiences for international customers. Joining us is an expert on this topic, Naveen Gunti. Naveen is Vice President, Head of Logistics and Digital and Technology in the international markets at American Eagle Outfitters. Naveen brings to the conversation more than a decade of e-commerce and digital experience for retailers including Tumi, Brooks Brothers, Theory, and Helmut Lang. And before that, served as Director of Technology, Multi-Channel Marketing, and Commerce Solutions for digital agencies Razorfish and Sapient Nitro. Naveen, welcome to the Frictionless Experience.
Thank you, Chuck. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So tell us a little bit more about your role at American Eagle and what you and your team are focused on.
Yeah, so I've been with American Eagle for over 3 years. Primarily came over taking responsibilities on developing an international technology ecosystem that supports not only digital but all channels that touches customers, right? So that since then I've been working on supporting leadership team on expanding into different markets, channels, and digital was always my primary focus, and that's what I also have bring to the table for last 10 to 15 years. I've ran e-commerce, either it's P&L or from digital technology perspective, but coming from technology background has always given like extra advantage to make sure that it's not just how you leverage technology or how you retrofit technology into what you need, but rather use technology the way you need, right? It's very customer lens I apply for everything I do. So that's what I do. I talk to different regions who lead e-commerce Either it's a partner ecosystem or a licensee or a joint venture or even owned and operated markets, right? So that's my basically my responsibility.
And how many countries are you all operating in today?
Oh wow, I think almost people in 60 countries touch and use our products. Uh, some countries we talk to them directly. Like in some countries, we go through partners. So I always speak to my team, using the words customer and consumer, right? The way I define to my team consumer is like actually the end customer who is actually touching and using our product. Customers can be anyone, either a B2B or a partner or whoever is. So it becomes even more important to not only control the narrative where we are talking to consumers directly, also help our customers who talk to our consumers indirectly, right? So that's how I see it, and we are, as I said, in 60 or more than 60 countries.
Gotcha. So let's talk about some of the unique challenges that you face outside the US market. Like, what are some of the differences you have to contend with when selling in different countries?
Yeah, so a lot of things. First of all, it's funny. I always say that international is not one country. Though just because international is one department, people perceive that it's one country. No, it's not. So in itself, some countries are within countries, like Europe, India, for example. It's one country, but I can speak to so many challenges on how consumers are different, how languages are different. Every state in India has a different language. So yeah, international comes with a lot of challenges. And historically, American Eagle has been, was born and brought up in US, right? We are very strong in US. Consumer knows us very well. But I think it's almost 10 years we have been selling internationally. But selling internationally is different from being truly an international brand, right? So that's the differentiation that we had to make. That's the journey we started like 4 or 5 years ago. And in this process, what I saw is yes, people develop a perception about the brand. So that perception sometimes is good, sometimes causes friction. It starts right up there, right?
What are some examples of that when you say that? What kind of friction just in perception then?
So when you run a brand like such a strong brand, and brand name itself is American Eagle, and uh, you know some areas like people who travel to US, they walked away thinking like we are denim brand. And in some, sometimes your strengths become your weaknesses when you enter into new markets, right? So when we enter into a new market, yes, we are American Eagle, but we're not just denim brand. We do much more than that, right? So it's very important to redefine ourselves and reposition ourselves depending on the demographics, the strengths, and what is applicable in that market, right? So it starts right up there. And if we don't land the eagle, we always use the word land the eagle, right? So if we don't land it right, the friction starts right there, and people can get to your homepage and just drop off. So
That's that's something that's really interesting to me, because the perception of different regions of what the brand is when you before you even enter the digital space. Like you've just said, okay, American Eagle to me as an individual in the Southeast United States is different than that of the Northeast United States, the West, Europe, Africa, Australia, Asia, India, wherever you want to define it. Each of those definitions is different before you even get there. So how do you lean into that difference to make sure that that perception that they have and they want that brand to be for them is something that works for them? That's a really interesting customization.
yeah, I think we have reasonable data that we have, because as I was saying, we have been selling there but not directly selling there, either through cross-border shipping or through various ways, right? Whether consumer traveling to US and buying the product. So I think we have enough data to position. And also, when we go in as American Eagle has like 5 to 6 other brands too, like some incubated, some, there is another second brand called Airy, which is very powerful in US,
My
right?
wife loves Aerie. It's her favorite brand. Like, no doubt about it. Her
Yeah.
favorite brand.
Look, I have 2 daughters, both of them love Airy, right? So, again, how we land these brands, right? Airy, for example, is seen as, is seen as intimates here. But Airy is seen as, like, when we land the same brand in Middle East, you land it very differently because of several factors around that. We land it as a much more, fashion, women's fashion, right? Leggings, things like. So it's very important that we land it correct so that we avoid that kind of, yeah, just at the first step itself, remove that friction, right? People come in either with a clean mindset, or like, no, I have bought denim already, so let me go, now it's available locally, let me buy it here, right? So it's very different. That's what I was saying. So, good thing is, as I said, we had a lot of data. We had partners who have been working with us, so that has helped us, for most part, land it correctly. And once you land it correctly, it's like, yeah, I think it takes off. How once you have the audience, I won't even talk about how you bring the audience to the site yet, but once you have the audience, how do you keep them, right? This friction thing is so important because traffic is the most expensive thing in the digital world. And a lot of times when you go back and ask for more marketing dollars, is like, smartest thing is to handle your traffic better rather than go get more traffic.
Yeah,
So
you're making Mark Friedman proud. We talked about that with him in a previous episode. He said almost exactly the same thing, which was just saying, "Hey, you don't need more traffic. You need to do more with the traffic you're getting." So it definitely resonates with some previous episodes here.
yeah, because once you have that, then a lot of factors come into the play. You can, it's probably a discovery, checkout, post checkout, right? Even if you look at 3 different stages there, all play important reasons, all play important value in how you can, not only not only avoid the friction in converting them, also retaining them. Like, there are the people, we look at friction as just converting a blocker, but retention is a much bigger thing that you might end up buying now, but you'll never come back. That's also a friction.
And a lot of that friction can come from the experience of the actual fulfillment side of it. Or maybe I wasn't able to go in and see my order status. That's not a converting event very often, is checking your order status, but people want to do it, and they want to do it often, especially when they're highly anticipating that their item's coming and they have to get it by some birthday because those leggings are the only thing that the granddaughter wanted or whatever, right? That's a very interesting loyalty building concept there.
Right. It's also product quality, so many things. Yes, last mile services, I think last mile service has evolved much better in majority of the markets we are playing in. But more than that, like, even, making it returns easy, like, don't leave any sour taste in their mouth after that, right? So for me, the friction starts, friction is like entire life cycle friction, not just conversion friction, right? That's the way I look at it, and that has helped for large part. And coming specific to international, why it's so different is, even how we name the products, right? We take things for granted, like, yeah, pants here is trousers in UK. Nobody searches for pants there. That's friction. Like, they might be searching for trousers, and if you haven't taken enough, uh, you know care to handle that kind of, situation, then they just bail, right? Then they might not even see the product. or we might end up showing wrong product, which is even worse, right? So product names, translations are the biggest pain point today in the international world for us. And sometimes translations are direct translations. There is so much cultural aspect to it, localization aspects to it, and even how we represent the product on listing pages and product pages. Some countries, it depends on models. You have to be very careful. That causes friction too. So there is enough friction that you can cause by not showing the right product, or by not showing the product in a right way, or you're not even giving them right information to create the desire to purchase.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are really easy things to solve for yourself, but it's very difficult to solve for a one size fits all. So it kind of starts getting into a personalization game at a regional level, really, less so than a data collection and let me learn about this specific person and say this is the thing they want because they've been shopping for it. That's not what I'm referring to, but like, how do you personalize to that region? Because that's going to be paramount to, as you say, landing in a new region. But one thing that really comes to mind here for me is how much of landing in a new region is the actual digital experience, and how much of that is something that is before that. It kind of transcends the digital, something that starts in just building that brand awareness in the first place.
Well, it's every market has been different. There are markets where we land first digital, right? We cannot afford to do brick and mortar everywhere as first entry, right? So I think there are also advantages with digital, because you can test and learn, and you can fail fast, and you can even retract fast without hurting the brand too much, right? So digital has been playing very key role in that way, right? Plus with lots of this cross-border shipping, and ease of how quickly you can get product from even across countries, digital has played such a big role, right? And that gives a lot of advantages. And at the same time, end of the day, P&L is P&L. It's very important, right? You need to keep it operationally sustainable. Like, I can't have army of people in each country running business. So how do we run it in scalable way? And that brings in complexity on how do you manage the business, multiple languages, multiple it's not just languages, it's about how you use the ecosystem to run the business in multiple ways, right? So that discovery section, through creating that desire to the product where they click on add to cart, that itself is more challenging. And it honestly, the second part, the transactional part, managing friction, is much easier because it's very quantifiable, it's easily seeable, right? Better payment methods make it easy. It's very black and white once they click add to cart. But before that, you have to anticipate so many things, and that friction is not even quantifiable that easily.
True. And it's funny because you mentioned the language and you mentioned sort of dialects too. Because my wife is from South America, but she grew up in Puerto Rico for a lot of her life, and so she was doing translation for me at one country or one company, and it was interesting because different words have different meanings. They just don't translate the same. Do you have local translators, or how do you work that to get those nuances?
Yeah, it's like mix of everything, right? Again, when we are operating in so many countries with so many languages, it's not sustainable for me to have human translations everywhere, right? So we do a lot of machine generated translations and then human QA. And when you rely on machine generated translations, like, it's a trade-off between how you can manage your P&L, right? So, and operationally how you can be efficient. So machine generated translations they're getting better, but they're still not there, and there is no human bias to it yet, right? So that's why translations are tricky. But yeah, the other option is like I hire linguists in every country and have them translate. That's not only cost prohibitive, it's also the time to market is very difficult. When I launch new products every week, we cannot turn around translations that fast, right? So it's a balance. It's a fine balance we have to.
Interesting. Now, and one of the topics we've talked about on this podcast before is this concept of phygital, how digital experiences often become physical experiences in the last mile, like you talked about. Talk about how the connection from digital to physical presents unique challenges internationally, because it seems like logistically that becomes so much more complex.
Yeah. So uh, as I was saying, right, the phygital is really a luxury. It's an omni, when you're in omni, you have much more benefits, right? But for when you are expanding into new markets and so fast, there are only few markets where we do omni entry, right? So when that's there, there is little more there are few areas where you can help with the friction, right? For example, yeah, if I have a store, I have a digital website, right? On the PDP, I can give an option for somebody to click and that opens a video session with the with the store associate in the store, and take through that different journey to you know to help them discover the product better and make the decision better, right? So yes, you might ask, like, why do you need store within the country to do that? It's again the cultural language, everything plays in, right? So if somebody is in Germany and I route the traffic to a store in India, we might have that won't work,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there are opportunities if it's omni ecosystem, and if I can leverage physical brick and mortar to help convert a digital consumer. This is happening everywhere, right? And that's the level of maturity in particular market when we have. There are so many tools and technologies in place, but bringing all those together and to create that experience relies on all these factors.
Right. Have you found situations, the things you've learned in international markets that then improve how you deliver experiences in the US market? Like, do you work closely and take some of those learnings in both directions?
Yeah, we work very closely from user experience perspective, right? And then basically, we have a UX team in America. Like they still come up with all these templates which are on brand, all that aspects go through, but that UX we still need to take and localize to that market, right? So there is definitely a baseline we establish and we test it, and that test involves like everything. Where is this the right form of showing the product? Is this the right template to use to show that particular product? So we go through all that, but take that aspects and localize. In this process of localization to that particular market. Yeah, when we put, for example, in Japan, right? When I apply that language and that lyrics and that script onto the same UX, it might look completely different. So I might have to tweak it, right? So we go through that all the time. In fact, that's been very beneficial to start from somewhere and localize it. And we go through this a lot in Mexico market as well. Mexico market is one of like the biggest international markets we have. We think the consumer is just across the border. It's just Spanish. No, it's a lot different, compared to U.S. consumer in Mexico.
So, Nick, I think my favorite retailer and I need therapy.
You and another website?
I've waited 5 seconds for it to load. 5. I could have gone and brewed coffee.
That's a quick coffee maker, first of all, but that sounds like a performance issue to me.
Yeah, instead of communicating, it just spun.
So you left, I'm sure. Classic abandonment issue due to latency.
Exactly. And that's why the Lowe's SRE team built site speed targets with Blue Triangle, so their users don't get ghosted by loading icons.
This is 5 steps to faster pages and fewer heartbreaks, all in the context of improved experience and improved revenue.
In fact, we turned it into a free playbook.
It's like a couples therapy for your digital experience. For you and your website, Chuck.
So be sure to grab the 5-step site speed target playbook at bluetriangle.com/playbook.
Because love is patient, but users aren't.
I'll tell you from my experience at Home Depot, I would occasionally work with the Canadian team and the Home Depot Mexico team. And man, functionally speaking, it's just a different mentality, not only from a customer perspective, but from the way you even just get things done inside the digital ecosystem. It's just a different mentality. I always found that very interesting myself. But I bet one of the really cool things, I would love to sit in your seat for, a week, because I'd love to be able to see the difference between one test in 2 different markets and providing opposite results, because I bet that happens often.
Example right away, like this social proofing, right? Creating that sense of urgency using that proofing concept, saying like, hey, so many people have seen the product, so many people have bought the product. Like it used to work so well years ago, and thanks to these travel companies like Expedia, who kind of like, I've tested myself. I book a seat and I go back and refresh, the same number of seats are still available. So the trust factor comes in, right? And how you build that trust factor, and that plays the brand, right? So
I can't tell you how many times I've booked a seat. I know I picked a stupid seat and I get a different seat, and I know I didn't choose this seat. Oh my gosh, this happens to me way too much.
yeah. So, this testing is very useful, definitely, but tweaking those tests to that market, that demographics, like I think also the brand positioning, right? The American Eagle brand compared to US in international is seen as premium, seen as more aspirational, right? When it's aspirational, you can't run a test which is too basic. So,
And where is it more? So where is it considered premium? More in the U.S. or more outside the U.S.?
outside the US.
Outside the U.S.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Outside the
They want
US
that
is
American product. Okay, interesting.
correct. Very aspirational. Yeah.
Are there some examples, because you mentioned Mexico in particular, are there some examples of different consumer behaviors or things that just kind of trip up the experience and create friction?
Yes, absolutely. Mexico is like a fast developing market, right? When even from 3 years ago to now, I have seen it's a highly cash market, very underpenetrated credit cards, and there are several reasons why credit card companies are still underpenetrated. Very high fraud, acceptance rates are very low. So how do you create that experience where you can still be in digital and have some of these things mitigated, right? There are at the same time there are things like you can there is a chain called OXXO, which they have like probably 10 to 15,000 locations within Mexico, and they have created that amazing ecosystem where you place an order online, you go to any store, there are like 7-Elevens in every corner, and you go make the payment using cash, and that finishes the checkout, right? So obviously I can just take the US website, translate into Spanish, go try it in Mexico, it won't work, right? That's where I'm saying US is much more mature market in that way. Like even the concept of buy now, pay later is very different in Mexico compared to US. And US, historically probably a credit driven economy. It's very different that, the acceptance levels that, so, I have to look at every aspect of it. Right. And then even even how people convert, like a lot of people, the aspect of bringing in social or community into overall commerce is so important. Here it's highly matured. There it's very important. It's seen as something, if you're not doing that, you're not doing something right. Right. So yes, building all these things around the product is very different. How you go about it is very different. And then you take that and figure out, what app means, how apps, digital, mobile apps are used in other countries to here probably is very different. And it is different, actually, I have seen, right? It's still in some countries, apps are used as transactional. And in this country, if you're not giving a compelling reason and keep them engaged, probably your apps are gone. Right? Except for Amazon. Amazon is the only outlier that you don't need anything, you still need it, right? So, but there are things like that, and the other thing is, a lot of countries took a leapfrog into mobile broadband. Right here, it was a gradual evolution from that AOL dial tone to broadband to mobile, right? So now, if I take my US experience and even any other experience, and let's say I go to India, India is completely mobile-driven ecosystem. And not only mobile, there are so many digital channels now. Marketplaces are playing such a big role in a lot of other countries, more so than in US. Actually, US probably a direct-to-consumer driven business, plus a wholesale driven business. Department stores are, we can already see every day in the news what's happening with department stores. So you have to not only compete with marketplaces from user experience, from their customer service, from their last mile service, right? All these will generate friction, and you'll start cannibalizing pretty soon if you don't create that same experience on your website, right? You're basically, it's not even friction within the website. It's a friction coming from elsewhere. It's like people are comparing, right? So even the comparison is generating a lot of friction. So again, that India I was talking about, large ecosystem of marketplaces. Mexico is, also has marketplace ecosystem like Mercado Libre and Liverpool, these things, right? So you're not just outdoing yourself, you also have to keep catching up with these large marketplaces and outdo them if you can. All this is like macro friction for me.
Macro friction. I like that phrase.
Yeah, because it's like friction is not just rubbing two hands anymore, right? Friction is coming from outside too now. So it's very important to look at that big picture too.
Yeah, I think we just titled this episode.
I have I can tell you that on my website, one click, 1 hour, you'll have the product at your home. That's not enough anymore.
They want it faster than 1 hour?
Somebody is outdoing it. They're saying, no, one click, just speak to my website and I'll deliver.
I mean, I'm just saying, but Cyber Monday, Amazon did have something to me in like literally 3 hours from the moment of ordering. Cyber Monday, like I'm not the only person ordering that day. That's crazy.
I
mean, like in India, they're delivering in 1 hour.
Wow.
Large country.
Are they using like Uber or something, one of the fleets like that to do it?
Yes. The last mile service has been one of the amazing things that has happened. Like even remote, that's a large country. You cannot have brick and mortar presence everywhere. and mobile has taken off. E-commerce has taken off just because of the last mile provider beef up. Right? There's so many, so many innovations that have happened. It's not just Uber. It's, a lot of local players too. And in US, I'm still like same day, next day, I'm charging the customer. Where in other countries, it's given. Like if you're not giving me in 3 hours, like you're not there, right? And I think that there is some healthy competition too, because marketplaces are imposing that on us, right? So yeah, that's why I keep thinking like, when it's friction, yeah, I can do everything best on my website, and imagine there is no friction.
Interesting. Macro friction, right? So what companies do you take inspiration from that consistently create frictionless experiences, and who has this really dialed in internationally?
For me, friction is very subjective on type of product I'm looking to purchase. Like, sometimes if it's just like something on Amazon, they have, of course, done much better than a lot of players. I might still, I might still place there. Like, let's say if there is a scarcity of the product and it's probably back order, back order is technically a type of friction if I try to do it, right? If there is a scarcity of product, that's probably not perceived as a friction. I want it, so I'm willing to wait for it, right? So it's very subjective, and for me, that's why Amazon does different things. Again, Apple does it differently too. So I basically look at all these. I like Abercrombie and Fitch, what they are doing, and I like, for example, if I go to Burberry site, I see so much content thrown at my face. That's friction for me. But you know Burberry, right? So I think this is where I was also, when I started saying how you land the brand, and the brand perception matters a lot, how you see something as a friction or not.
Yeah, you gave two examples that were very opposite that I find interesting, where in some countries or in some situations, if you can't deliver the product in an hour, you may not get the sale. And in other ones where it's a highly prized item that is not available, people are willing to wait and they don't mind it. So I think there's a super interesting concept there of friction is in the mind of the beholder, right?
Well,
It's
I think elevating a little bit on that is to say that the product demand itself can eliminate friction just by being in such high demand. So a great example that most people can resonate with is like when the PlayStation 5 was just released. It was impossible to get. It didn't matter how crappy the digital experience was. You're going to wait and you're going to hope you check out for this thing. Similarly, Air Jordans or Yeezys release, you're just going to sit there and refresh Twitter until you finally find a retailer. You don't care which retailer. You're just clicking a retailer that will let you buy it. And if you get through and you can actually hit purchase and add to cart and do everything that you need to do, and the system doesn't break, you assume it breaks because the product's not there. You don't assume that it breaks because there's friction.
There are cases where systems broke and people were still to sit there and wait. Like, for example, Taylor Swift concert tickets. Classic.
I was about to go there.
Classic example, right? Servers crashed, they broke, people are still waiting there.
And,
So
and I have a friend who did it for like 5 hours for her daughter, just sitting there refreshing to get her daughter tickets.
Yeah. So, again, the friction is very subjective. We cannot just objectify, this is friction, this is what it is. A lot of things that were considered as friction 5 years ago, they're all table stakes now. Right? Everybody is doing that. So, type of brand, how you position the brand, type of the product, how you even make the product available for, there are a lot of things. But again, that doesn't mean you cater to all other table stakes. You still need best last mile. You still need to make sure you have all the local payment methods. Those are all given things. If we are having that conversation about those basic things, we are probably behind, way behind.
Yeah. You know, people don't remember this, but there was a point in time when the drive-through in fast food was a competitive advantage. The first ones that offered that, because of the convenience, you didn't have to get out of your car. You had kids strapped into their car seats and stuff. That you would go to those restaurants that had it because so many did not. So it's kind of the evolution of technology, the evolution of these things that we take for granted today. At one point, were competitive advantages, and it sounds like that's kind of what you're talking about when it relates to friction.
Right, right. There's a lot of things like, yeah, we outdate our friction by ourselves, right? Loyalty programs, classic example. They can be friction, they can be not friction. Like, I'll give a best example that I go through myself, right? Pioneers of loyalty program, so-called frequent flyer programs of airlines, pioneers. Now nobody cares. You might have best loyalty program, but if there is some bad news about your planes and your uh, mechanics and instruments there, I'm not going to fly that, right? So just because you have loyalty program, you think you have eliminated friction? Definitely not.
There's a brand out there, and I'm not going to say the brand, but I'll just tell you, I buy from them relatively frequently. I have one of their little loyalty memberships, but their login experience is so bad that I hit guest checkout instead. I do not care about my points. I care about nothing because it's so disjointed in the experience when you're checking out that I'm just like, man, I'd rather just hit guest checkout and just let I'll let Google Chrome fill in my information rather than you have my card saved or whatever. It's just as easy nowadays.
It's funny you brought up guest checkout, right? It rings bell for me. If you don't have guest checkout in US, you're not in the game. There are a lot of countries, there is no guest checkout at all. People are expected to log in, but then there are nowadays, like, there are so many easy ways to log in. you know there are so many convoluted ways to log in, right? Facial recognition login, thumb, fingerprint login. In spite of all these, still US hasn't evolved completely. We still need guest checkout here. If we don't have a guest checkout, it's like, game over, right? So, it's interesting what friction means, what you see as a friction, what someone else sees as a friction, and then how you bring everything together and find that common denominator that you need few things to be in business, and you do other things to make sure at least you cater to your audience. So you need to understand your demographics and what friction means to that demographics, and stop chasing the tail. So that's what I've been very focused about, right? And my only complexity for me is every country I go in, I have different demographics. So I have to understand cultural friction and now geopolitical factors. Like, I don't even need to talk about that friction on this call, like, with everything going on now, and with the brand that stands for American Eagle, with the name American in it, how to avoid friction, right? So, yeah. So, I mean, like, end of the day, now I come back, and as much philosophical as it sounds, like, what is friction here?
So with the political waves comes increase and decrease in demand of American Eagle just because you have American in the name.
Sometimes, yeah. So, yeah, who would have imagined that's a friction?
True.
For me, friction is all over the place.
It is. It is. This has been fascinating. So, Naveen, what do people get wrong about driving frictionless digital experience? What's a widely held belief about the digital experience that you just fundamentally disagree with?
I think, what I was saying, right? When you're thinking that it one size fits all, and what you think is friction for your audience, you can get it wrong. And obviously, I am leaned towards bias, and I don't, I, I kind of, I'm selling good product. I'm sure you want my denim, you'll come buy denim, even if Apple Pay is not working. That's my bias, right? But that's where I'm saying, you, first of all, you cause friction by thinking that you are the audience. The friction is about your audience, not yourself, right? I think that's what I argue with a lot of my user experience experts in my experience, right? So user experience is about like best practices. I know this, I have done this. No, user experience, the word user in itself, it's for user. You are creating the experience, right? So for me, that's the probably one thing which I argue all the time with multiple people. And then we get into quickly like, how do we test it? Even there, we apply bias. How do you test it? Have you selected right people to test it? So having foregone conclusions, what are, again, I'm saying all this by prefacing that I'm not talking about table stakes anymore. Those days are gone. You are in a world where friction can come from in any direction. It's not about clicks on the website, and you are in the digital world. So how do you do that? That's where I think adapting quickly is more important. Friction is not anymore about making it easy to purchase. I mean, friction is a lot more than that.
I love hearing this because one of the concepts I talk about all the time is developer bias and product bias, which basically means when you go out and you try to figure out your experiment, or you go out and you have to solve a problem, you want to create a website or whatever, you're developing for yourself on your own computer in the best network within the best ecosystem. Everything is ideal conditions, but you're not thinking about what happens when it's non-ideal conditions. And that is what creates so much friction inside each digital experience. Then on the product side, you go and create your experiment and then you're proving your hypothesis instead of testing it. What a major flaw that is inside everything. So your advice is probably the best advice I've heard in a long time.
I think it's not even optional. It's you got to. That's the only way I see it. I've been through this. It's pretty organic process for me. Last 15 years, there were days when I used to think like, okay, make it easy to purchase, make add to cart big and bold, write a good product description, done. Those days are gone, unfortunately, right? So yeah, it's I think it's very interesting. Friction is not static anymore. It's not like one time you develop best site with best user experience. It's not enough.
What are 2 or 3 final recommendations you have for listeners that they can apply in their roles to drive more frictionless digital experiences?
Stop making assumptions. Put yourself in user shoes. Then test, test, test. That's the best way. And don't sit on it assuming that you have done your best and there is no more friction. Then you're causing, that's the beginning of causing friction with yourself.
That's
That's
awesome.
the way I see it.
Awesome. What a great way to end the conversation. Thank you for a great conversation, Naveen. Where can listeners find you? What's the best way to reach you, like on social media or where?
I think it's funny. I'm a digital guy, but I'm not on any of the social media except LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is the only way, and or they can reach me on on my email. I used to tweet, but not anymore. I still have a Twitter account, but LinkedIn is the best place. I think that's where I make a lot of contacts, and I still keep in touch with a lot of contacts.
Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning into this episode of the Frictionless Experience. Remember to follow us on your favorite podcast player app so you automatically receive notifications each time we upload a new episode. Be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Let us know what you think and what topics you would like us to cover. We'd be happy to cover anything that might be causing you friction. And of course, you can always find and connect with me and Nick on LinkedIn, except when Nick is not on LinkedIn.
No, I am on LinkedIn. I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm on nothing else. I'm on nothing else.
Okay, that was the nuance. Okay, great. Well, actually, then you can find us on LinkedIn.
Fun story to leave you with. When I met my wife way back, she said, "Oh, do you have any social media profiles?" And I said, Yeah, I do. LinkedIn. She thought I was such a buffoon for saying that because I called LinkedIn social media. This is like 10 years ago.
Nick, I'll just say one thing, right? Maybe, that's the best job you found through LinkedIn in your life.
There it is. There it is. Absolutely right.
And she still married you, despite you not understanding what social media is.
It's funny. She wanted that, like, because she was an influencer. She had 100,000 followers or something, and she was an influencer and was like glad that I didn't know how to use Instagram properly. Like, she was teaching me to use Instagram so that she could tag me because she was an influencer. Like, she needed that. She needed that in the environment. So
yeah, it's funny. Anyway.
Couldn't have two influencers in the family. That would be competition.
No, definitely not. Definitely not.
All right. Well, that's it for this episode. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.